They never saw her coming, not because she was trying to hide, but because they'd already decided who she was. To them, she was just a waitress. Black, scarred, quiet, a background character in their small town routine. She walked with her head down, refilled their coffee, took their orders, and ignored the whispers. No one cared to ask why her left cheek bore the twisted reminder of fire, or why her arm, always mostly hidden by long sleeves, looked stiff when she reached for the ketchup bottles. They just stared, judged, laughed, sometimes cruelly, when they thought she couldn't hear. But everything changed the day a stranger walked into that diner. An old veteran with sharp eyes and a memory that never forgot a battlefield. And when his gaze landed on the faded tattoo barely visible under her sleeve, he stood up, heart pounding, stunned beyond words. Because he knew exactly what that mark meant, and it meant that woman wasn't just a waitress. She was one of them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it started, at the corner of 8th and Cottonwood, inside a dusty little diner called Molly's, where silence was safer than truth. It was 7:08 a.m. when Keisha arrived, just like she did every morning. Her shift started at 7, but she always showed up early to wipe the counters, restock the condiments, and take a moment to herself before the town's regulars filed in. The same chipped "Open" sign buzzed weakly in the window, flickering with a pulse that made it seem half alive. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and the familiar scent of coffee and bacon grease wrapped around her like an old blanket. Molly's diner wasn't anything fancy. Just a narrow space with faded red booths, black and white checkered floors, and a counter that had seen better days. The same people sat in the same spots, ordering the same meals, griping about the same things: taxes, potholes, politics, weather, or the high school football team. And they noticed everything, especially anything that didn't fit. Keisha didn't fit. She kept her sleeves rolled low, her collar high, and her mouth shut. She wasn't shy exactly, just tired. Tired of questions, tired of assumptions, tired of being stared at like she was part ghost, part curiosity. "Morning, Keish," said Carla, the manager, without looking up from the register. Morning. Carla was decent. Not warm but not mean either. Just a woman running a diner on thin margins, trying to keep the staff from quitting and the health inspector off her back. She didn't ask Keisha questions. Didn't ask where she came from or how she got those scars. That suited Keisha just fine. By 7:45, the breakfast rush had begun. Regulars trickled in like clockwork. Mr. Dalton sat at the third booth with his usual copy of the Post-Courier. Evelyn, whose voice could cut glass, ordered poached eggs and griped about the mayor. And then there were the high school kids, loud, bored, and always hunting for something to mock. "Hey, Scarface," one of them muttered once as Keisha passed their booth. "Forgot your mask today." She heard it. Of course she did. But she said nothing. Just tightened her grip on the coffee pot and walked away. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Keisha had seen things that would empty the color from their cheeks. She'd heard the sharp whistle of rockets, smelled blood in desert sand, dragged bodies, some alive, some not, out of burning vehicles with her own scorched hands. But she didn't wear a uniform anymore. Now, she wore an apron. She didn't carry a rifle, just a tray. And if the town had its way, that's all she'd ever be. At 8:12 a.m., the bell above the door jingled again. An old man stepped in, his shoulders squared with discipline. He wore a tan jacket, military patches sewn down the sleeves, and a dark ball cap embroidered with gold thread that read 173rd Airborne Brigade. He looked around once, then took a seat at the far end of the counter. Keisha poured him a cup of coffee. "Black?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice gravelly but polite. "And maybe a name to go with that pour." She paused. "Keisha." He nodded. "Nice to meet you, Keisha. I'm Harold." They didn't say much after that. Not at first. Harold stirred his coffee, watched her as she moved behind the counter. Not in a creepy way, but with a kind of puzzled familiarity. Like someone trying to remember where they'd seen a face before. Then he saw it. As Keisha bent to grab a new stack of mugs from below, her sleeve slid up, just enough to reveal a few faded lines on her upper forearm. The ink had blurred over time, but the shape was unmistakable, a parachute with wings, and the numbers 3509 scrawled beneath. Harold froze. The 3rd Battalion, 509th Infantry Regiment, a unit within the Airborne Brigade. He knew it well, and he knew that no one wore that mark unless they had earned it through blood and fire. Keisha stood up straight and adjusted her sleeve quickly, as if she knew he'd seen. Harold cleared his throat. "Keisha, if I'm not mistaken, that tattoo of yours, you served, didn't you?" She turned to him slowly. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in hostility, but in a quiet, wary defensiveness. "I don't talk about that," she said softly. Harold nodded. "I won't pry. Just I thought I recognized something. I was with the 173rd too, long time ago." She didn't respond at first. Then, almost too softly to hear, she said, "Afghanistan. I was a medic. Paratrooper." Harold leaned back, stunned. "You were with 3509 in Kandahar." Keisha nodded once. A long pause passed between them, silent, heavy, respectful. "You saw some hell, didn't you?" Her eyes dropped to the floor. "More than most." Harold said nothing. He just tapped the side of his coffee cup gently and whispered, "Well, I'll be damned." That was the first time someone in that town looked at her and saw more than the scars. But it wouldn't be the last. Because in the booth behind Harold, a group of high schoolers had overheard just enough to be curious, and just stupid enough to test their luck. "Wet, you were in the army?" one kid asked, turning around to face Keisha. She didn't respond. "You serious?" Another kid laughed. "You, no offense, but you don't really scream soldier." Harold slowly turned his head. "You think you need to look a certain way to jump out of airplanes and patch up bodies under gunfire?" He asked coldly. "This woman's got more grit in one hand than you have in your whole pampered life." The teens laughed nervously, unsure how to respond. Keisha stepped back. "It's fine, Harold." "No, it's not," he said. "You don't get to mock someone who wore the uniform. You don't get to laugh at what you don't understand." One of the boys scoffed. "Come on, we're just joking." Harold stood up. His voice dropped, almost a growl. "That patch on her arm. That unit. They were hit hard in 2010. Lost good people. She probably watched friends die. And she still pulled 3 men out of a burning Humvee before she passed out from her injuries. So unless you've done something remotely close to that, maybe you should shut your damn mouth." The diner went dead silent. The teenagers, now red-faced and ashamed, gathered their stuff and left without another word. Keisha stood still behind the counter, shoulders tense, heart pounding. She hadn't wanted this. She hadn't asked for attention. But for the first time in a long while, someone had stood up for her. Someone had seen her. Harold sat back down and sipped his coffee. "You saved lives, didn't you?" he asked. Keisha didn't answer directly. She just looked down at the scars on her arms and said, "I tried." Harold nodded. "That's all any of us could do." That night, Keisha lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, her arms folded under her head, listening to the soft ticking of the wall clock in her studio apartment. The room was small. One room, a kitchenette, a bathroom with peeling tiles. But it was hers, and for a long time, it was the only place where she didn't feel judged. But tonight, it felt different. Harold's voice echoed in her mind. "You saved lives, didn't you?" She had. Whether the town knew or not. Whether they believed her or not. Whether they cared or not. She still remembered every face, every scream, every heartbeat that slowed beneath her bloody fingers. Every radio call that ended in silence, and she remembered the heat. The flames that swallowed her squad's Humvee like a monster made of light. The moment the door jammed. The moment she dislocated her shoulder, yanking it open. The moment her skin melted onto the steering wheel as she pulled Private Anderson free. The last thing she heard before everything went black was someone yelling her name. She woke up 2 weeks later in a military hospital in Germany, wrapped like a mummy, barely able to speak. She didn't see any of the survivors until 6 months later. And none of them ever came back home to her town. They went on with their lives, new assignments, new places, new chances to heal. Keisha came back to a town that never asked why her face looked like it had fought a war and lost. Only Harold had asked, and only Harold had known. The next morning, Harold returned. Same seat, same coffee, same quiet demeanor. But this time he brought a worn leather folder with him. As Keisha poured his coffee, he gently slid it across the counter. "What's this?" she asked. "Proof," he said, "because this town needs to remember who you are." Keisha opened the folder slowly. Inside were 3 items. 1, a copy of the commendation report filed after the Kandahar attack. 2, a photograph of Keisha in uniform, standing with her squad, her arm in a sling, her face still bandaged, her eyes hard as steel. 3, a newspaper clipping from a base paper overseas. Medic saves 3 in firefight. Survives against all odds. She stared at the photo. It had been years since she saw that version of herself. Strong, proud, alive. "Where did you get these?" she asked. "I still have friends in places." I asked around. Told them I met a hero who was being treated like a ghost. Keisha closed the folder and pushed it back. "I appreciate it. I really do. But this place, it's not gonna change. People don't care about that stuff anymore." Harold looked around the diner. Maybe. Maybe not. But they care about what's in front of them. And I'm going to make sure they see you. She sighed. "I don't want pity." "You won't get pity," he said. "You'll get respect." Later that afternoon, something strange happened. 2 teenage boys from the day before walked in. Not with their usual swagger, not smirking or shouting. They looked nervous. Keisha raised an eyebrow as she approached their booth. "Something I can get for you." The taller one, Jordan, she thought his name was, cleared his throat. Yeah. Just a couple sodas." Keisha nodded and walked off. When she returned, they both stood up. "We just wanted to say we're sorry," Jordan said. "For yesterday. We didn't know." The other boy nodded, his face red. My cousin's in the Navy. I asked him about your unit. He said what you did was insane. Like heroic. I guess we just never thought someone like you. Keisha tilted her head. Like me. He froze. I didn't mean it like that. Just someone in this town, you know. Keisha studied them for a long second. It's easy to laugh when you've never been in a war, she said. Harder when you realize how close some of us came to dying, just so you could have the freedom to laugh. They both looked down. Thanks for apologizing, she added, softer now. They nodded and left, leaving a $10 tip for 2 sodas. Harold watched from the counter, smiling slightly. You've got more influence than you think. I didn't ask for influence, Keisha said. No, but maybe influence found you anyway. 2 days later, Harold returned again. But this time he wasn't alone. He brought 4 other veterans with him. Men and women of all ages, all colors, wearing jackets covered in pins, caps stitched with ranks and deployments. Keisha stared at them from behind the counter as they walked in one by one, nodded respectfully at her, and took their seats. Harold grinned. Word travels fast. I didn't ask for this, she whispered. I know, but we're not letting one of our own sit alone anymore. The oldest among them, a woman with sharp cheekbones and a cane, spoke first. Saw your name on the report. I remember that day. I was running logistics back at the FOB. You were a damn legend that month. Keisha flushed. I wasn't trying to be. You were just doing your job. That's what makes it legendary. The others nodded. They didn't need details. They didn't need a dramatic retelling. They knew what it meant to survive hell and walk out changed. One by one, they each told her about their own returns. How the country had moved on. How no one looked at them the same. How they got tired of explaining themselves. You either hide, one said, or you remind people who the hell you are. That hit Keisha deep, because for years she'd chosen to hide. Not out of shame, but exhaustion. And yet now, surrounded by people who understood, she felt something stir. Not pride exactly, but permission. Permission to be whole again. Permission to be seen. That afternoon, Carla came out from the back. What's going on out here? She asked, looking at the small group of veterans holding coffee mugs like war medals. Harold stood up. This is your staff. A war hero. And today's the day you stop pretending she's just a waitress. Carla's eyes flicked to Keisha, then to the photos Harold now carried in his folder. Keisha didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her story was already speaking louder than words. Carla took a breath. All right, I get it. You want people to know who she is. Yes, Harold said. Then let's make sure they can't ignore it. The next morning, something remarkable happened. Carla cleared space on the bulletin board by the entrance. Right where people signed up for open mic night or posted missing pet flyers. She placed Keisha's photo there. Next to it, the newspaper clipping, and below it, a short note in Carla's handwriting, to our regulars. This is Keisha. You've known her as your waitress. What you didn't know is that she's a Bronze Star recipient, a former combat medic with the 173rd Airborne, and a survivor of the 2010 Kandahar convoy attack. She saved lives while nearly losing her own. She deserves more than tips. She deserves our respect. People stopped, stared. Some read the entire note twice. A few regulars who had never even looked Keisha in the eye before now nodded silently when she passed. Others left bigger tips. One woman left a bouquet of flowers on the counter. "Don't want to make a big deal," she whispered. "Just thank you." Keisha accepted it all quietly, gratefully, carefully. But inside something was changing. For the first time since coming home, she didn't feel like she had to disappear. She didn't feel like she had to shrink just to survive. People were finally seeing her, not as a scar, not as a curiosity, but as a survivor, as a soldier, as a woman worth knowing. And it all started with a stranger who saw more than what was on the surface, a stranger who recognized the ink most people ignored. It started with just a few veterans, a few curious regulars, a few changed hearts. But soon, it turned into something more. By the following week, Molly's Diner became something of a gathering place. More than just a spot to grab pancakes and eggs, it became a quiet tribute to those who'd been overlooked, forgotten, or written off. Word about Keisha's story had spread beyond the 4 blocks of their small town. It started when Harold shared the bulletin board post on Facebook. He didn't have many followers, but one of them happened to be a retired Army officer who ran a community page for veterans. That officer reshared it. Then a journalist from a small military magazine picked it up. By the time Keisha found out, her photo had been shared over 1,000 times. Strangers from other states were commenting, thanking her, calling her a hero. It felt strange. For so long, she had lived as if her story no longer mattered, and now the world seemed to be reminding her it did. That Friday morning, Keisha stepped into the diner to find Carla standing beside a woman in a gray pantsuit, holding a small microphone and a big smile. "This is Julie from Channel 6 News," Carla said. "She called last night and asked if she could do a local spotlight." Keisha froze. "Nung." Julie's smile faltered. "I mean, I appreciate it." Keisha added quickly, This wasn't supposed to be a thing. I don't want attention." Julie lowered the mic. "Totally understand. I've covered veterans before, and it's always on their terms. I just thought your story might inspire someone." Keisha looked toward the counter, where Harold was sitting, his hat in his lap. He gave her a small nod. "You don't owe anyone your story," he said. "But if telling it helps someone else, maybe it's worth it." Keisha sighed. "Only if we focus on everyone. Not just me. All the veterans who come in here. All the people who get overlooked." Julie lit up even better. The interview was brief. Just a few shots of the diner, a quick conversation with Keisha about her time in service, a pan across the faded tattoo on her arm. Keisha kept it real. She didn't sugarcoat the trauma. She didn't glamorize the war. She just spoke plainly. "I came back different. That part never goes away. But what hurts more than the injuries is feeling invisible. Like you came back, but you left the best parts of yourself over there. All I ever wanted was to feel like I mattered again." Julie's eyes glistened. So did Carla's. The next day, the segment aired on the local evening news, and everything changed again. By Monday, the diner was busier than it had ever been. Strangers drove in from 2 towns over just to shake Keisha's hand. A couple from upstate left a thank you card with a 100 tip, saying their son had served and died in the same province Keisha had. "We never got closure," the note read, "but somehow, hearing your story gave us peace." Keisha stood by the sink reading that card for almost 10 minutes before she folded it up and tucked it into her apron. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. because something had started to fill the emptiness she'd carried since the day she left that field hospital. The regulars began treating her differently, too. Evelyn, who once barely looked up from her eggs, now asked about her recovery, her hobbies, her dreams. Mr. Dalton, the quiet man with the newspaper, started bringing her clippings about female veterans and minority soldiers making a difference. Even the teenage boys, the same ones who had mocked her, now came in every Friday and helped Harold and the other vets organize community nights. One of them, Jordan, had joined the JRTC program at school. "We never knew what you went through," he told Keisha once, wiping down a table. "You just looked like, I don't know, just someone working here." Keisha smiled. "That's what most heroes look like, kid." But not everyone was happy about it. There were whispers. "She's just milking it now. Probably lying to get attention. I don't believe someone like her could have been in special forces." One night, as she was closing up, Keisha found a note shoved under the front door. It was scrawled in sharp black marker on a torn piece of envelope. "Waitress, AACRO, JUSTANUGLY She stared at it for a long time, and for the first time since all this began, the weight came back. The shame, the doubt, the urge to disappear again. But before she could tear it up, Carla came up behind her and saw it. Her face turned red. "Who the hell?" Keisha shook her head. "Doesn't matter." "Yes, it does," Carla snapped. "You've been nothing but strong since day one. You carried yourself with dignity while people whispered and stared. You didn't ask for this attention. But now that it's here, you don't get to let cowards take that away from you." Keisha blinked. "I'm not trying to be anyone's hero." "You already are," Carla said. "Whether you like it or not." She reached over, took the note, and dropped it into the sink. "Let watch while we burn the lies." Later that night, Harold invited Keisha to the local American Legion post. "You ever been?" he asked. She shook her head. "Well, tonight you should." She followed him through a side door into a large open hall. The walls were covered in photos, flags, and medals. Tables were set up for coffee and snacks, and the air buzzed with quiet conversations. Keisha walked in and the room stopped. One by one, the vets stood up, clapped. Some saluted. Others simply nodded. Harold leaned toward her. "They asked me to bring you. They've been waiting." A woman with short silver hair approached and pressed something into Keisha's palm. A small pin, a bronze star. "The real one gets mailed," she said softly. "But this one's from all of us. We've read your citation, we know what you did, and we want you to know you're not alone anymore." Keisha's hands shook. She hadn't worn a uniform in years. But that night, surrounded by people who understood her pain, who respected her sacrifice, she felt whole again. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't hiding anymore. She felt like she had come home. The town hadn't changed overnight. Not every whisper disappeared. Not every cruel stare went away. But something had shifted. Keisha could feel it each time she walked to work and someone actually looked her in the eye. She saw it in the way people smiled now. Not with pity, but with genuine respect. Even strangers seemed to soften when they saw her scars. They no longer recoiled. They no longer looked away. Now they paused. Now they listened. She had become a symbol. Not just of strength, but of survival. And she carried it with quiet grace. At Molly's diner, The changes were subtle but powerful. There was a new corner near the counter. A small table set up with a folded American flag, a single empty chair, and a framed photo of Keisha in uniform, donated by one of the local veterans. The table didn't need an explanation. Everyone who came in stopped to look. Some left coins or patches. Some just stood silently for a moment, then walked away. Every Thursday, the diner held a Vets Eat Free morning special. It was Carla's idea. Every soldier's got a story, she said. We just needed Keisha's to remember that. Harold came in like clockwork, always at 800 sharp. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. He and Keisha had built a kind of friendship that ran deeper than words. War forged strange families, and theirs, though small, was solid. One day, he brought her a gift. It was a small wooden box, polished and heavy. Inside was a plaque to PFC Keisha Morgan, for valor, for strength, for standing tall when the world tried to look away. Your brothers and sisters in arms. Keisha ran her fingers over the engraving. I don't deserve this. Harold raised an eyebrow. You earned it the day you ran into fire for people who couldn't move. You deserve it every day you get up and live with the weight of that choice. She looked down, swallowing hard. Some days I still feel broken. You're not, he said. You're rebuilt. Later that month, something unexpected happened. The mayor of the town, an older man known for shaking hands and doing very little else, showed up at the diner with a few reporters in tow. Keisha was on break, seated at the far end of the counter, sipping tea. Her shift was almost over, and she'd been looking forward to going home, maybe sitting on the porch for a while. Miss Morgan, the mayor said, approaching her. I wonder if you'd walk with me. She stood slowly. What's this about? He led her outside, where a crowd had gathered along Main Street. A canvas tarp hung over the brick wall of the building next door, opposite the diner. Keisha hadn't noticed it before. The mayor cleared his throat and nodded to one of the reporters. Earlier this year, our town lost a piece of its soul. The mayor began. We forgot that heroes don't always wear capes or medals. Sometimes they wear aprons. Sometimes they walk among us invisible. But today, we want to change that. He turned and motioned to a young girl on a ladder. She tugged the rope. The tarp fell away. And there, painted across the brick, was a mural. It showed Keisha in uniform, scars visible, shoulders squared, gaze sharp and unflinching. Behind her was a faint silhouette of her unit, blurred like ghosts watching over her. The sky was a sunrise, symbolizing new beginnings. Below the image, in bold lettering, read, "Courage is quiet until it speaks." The crowd erupted into applause. Keisha stood frozen, tears stinging her eyes. She'd never asked for this. Never wanted fanfare. But standing there, watching the faces of the people who used to look through her, who now looked up at her, she felt something else. She felt seen. That night, as the sun dipped behind the horizon and the mural glowed in the streetlights, Keisha sat across from Harold on a bench outside the diner. You did it, he said. I didn't do anything. You lived, he said. That's more than most. She leaned back, the stars slowly blinking awake above them. I thought my story ended when I came home, she said. It didn't, Harold replied. It just changed chapters. She looked at him. What comes next? He smiled. Whatever the hell you want. And she believed him. Because now people knew the truth. They knew what those scars meant. They knew what that ink on her arm stood for, and most of all, they knew her name. If this story moved you, if you believe that hidden heroes walk among us every day, scarred but unbroken, then help us share more powerful true stories like this. Hit subscribe to our channel, Lived Truths, and make sure the people who deserve to be seen are never invisible again.